Thank you, Amy.
Okay. Very good. So the first question from Jessica Craven, thanks Jessica, is here's a question about Medicare. What Medicaid services are Republicans looking to cut? So just to step back a little bit, we are living at a moment in time where we've gotten through the pandemic. Our economy, in my mind, was getting better, and it showed that jobs, especially for young people, were going up. And then what happens is Trump comes in, and instead of working on the actual problems we have in front of us, which are things like housing, and we don't have enough childcare, and we need to bring healthcare costs down. He comes out, first of all, with these tariffs, which have been a disaster. And then second of all, he comes out with this big, beautiful betrayal, is what I call it, because it's a betrayal of the American people. So there's two things. One, you mentioned Medicare, and one, you mentioned Medicaid. Both things are in peril and are being cut by this latest budget. And let me explain why it's different things for different reasons for different things. The first thing is Medicaid is very clear. From the very beginning, no matter what Donald Trump said, they have said that they're going to be cutting Medicaid in the bill. You look at the numbers and it shows that they cut Medicaid. There's no other way to get to their numbers without cutting Medicaid. And as you know, Medicaid is what people use, our seniors, when they're in assisted living. Half of them are on Medicaid. When my dad was in assisted living at the end of his life, I knew the exact moment he was going to run out of his savings. He'd been married, 3 times. All right. And so there wasn't a lot of savings left. And so I knew when that was going to happen. And then he would be moved. I had a plan of where I was going to bring him, Catholic Charities, that took Medicaid. And he ended up dying just shortly before that. But so many families know what I mean. Kids, grandkids, who are looking out for their loved ones. Then you have kids with disabilities that depend on Medicaid, and you have a number of people that need Medicaid for their health care. Secondly, and this bill has its proposed numbers just came out today, are going to kick 16 million Americans off health care. Second, you asked about Medicare, which is different. And the reason this is triggered is because the numbers are so bad that it's going to involve some cuts to Medicare now. They're focused on rural hospitals and those kinds of things. So those are the two kinds of things where we're seeing the cuts. The Medicaid has been out there for a while. The Medicare is relatively new because of the way they've done this. We believe there's going to be cuts to Medicare that'll primarily hurt hospitals who are already really operating on a small margin. Okay, next question. This is from Tammy on Instagram. Can you talk about what this will mean for SNAP? So SNAP is a food assistance program that helps people a lot of times temporarily when they're out of work or when they need some extra help. They may be working. A lot of them are working, but they may have a kid, 2 kids, 3 kids, and they don't have enough money to afford their groceries. SNAP helps primarily kids, people with kids, veterans, and seniors. So what they've done here is unbelievable. They've cut nearly $300 billion. That's billion dollars from SNAP in order to finance these tax cuts for the wealthy on the backs of the people that need it the most. I visited a bunch of food shelves recently in Minnesota, especially in rural areas where there's a high poverty rates in a lot of parts of our country. And I've also gone to grocery stores. So here's the thing to know about their SNAP cuts. Number one, and this is something that I think people don't really expect, but they are shifting over a bunch of money to the states. And they're saying, oh, hey, that's fine. The states will be able to pay for it. That is not fine at all. Half of these cuts, over half of the cuts, are shifts to states. 41 of our 50 states have balanced budgets amendments. So they're not going to be able to afford it. They're either going to have to cut people's food, groceries, or they're going to have to cut out law enforcement, or they're going to have to cut out some of their state mental health care or hospitals. Here's what they've said themselves. Kansas, state of Kansas, pretty much a red state, but has a Democratic governor, Laura Kelly. that state is going to have to shoulder $100 million extra. And she just says, we don't have the money. North Carolina, Governor Josh Stein, again, a Democratic governor in what is considered a red state, but we have had Democratic senators from there. And he says our state will be forced into perilous budget decisions. Should North Carolinians lose access to food, or should we get rid of other essential services? 580 million shifted over to North Carolina under this sleight of hand, ridiculous budget plan. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear, 170 million would go on his state budget. It's going to leave more of our kids and seniors going hungry. So that's what we're dealing with. The second thing is, if anyone's ever traveled in rural America, a lot of times there's just one grocery store in town. A lot of those grocery store customers, it can range anywhere from 5 to 40%, are on SNAP. And so this will, in stores that can hardly operate with a thin margin, this is going to mean getting rid of some of the grocery stores. And this is why so many of the grocery stores have been standing up against these cuts. Third thing is grocery prices. As you all know, since Donald Trump got into office, costs are up, chaos is up, corruption is up. And it's gotten more expensive for people to be able to buy food. And yet you'll cut the food assistance that people need to be able to buy the food. So that's why this is a huge part of this nightmares budget, which, as you know, as Elon Musk so nicely points out, is increasing the debt deficit by $3 trillion. Big problem. But at the same time, it's doing these tax cuts for the wealthy. That's what adds to the deficit on the backs of people that can't afford it. Next question, access to healthy food. So that's what a lot of this program is about, right? It's about being able to go into a grocery store. I was just in Coburn's grocery store in rural Minnesota the other day, and being able to buy apples, being able to buy lettuce, being able to buy some healthy food. Because if you have no money to buy food at all, well, what do? You buy just the cheapest packaged food that you can possibly get, or maybe what you are able to pick up at a small food shelf or something like that. And while you may get the calories, you don't get the healthy food, and it actually exacerbates our health problem and the like. And that's why we've worked so hard to make sure dairy's available and protein's available, and make sure fruits and vegetables are available, and expand our farm programs to create incentives for what we weirdly call specialty crops, but they're really everything you eat, for some of our smaller farmers, so they have some of the same access to a safety net that other farmers have always had. So that's one way we do it. The other way is with school lunches. And of course, the third way is with SNAP that I just mentioned. And school lunches are really important as well. So many of these cuts with Medicaid, with the cuts that we're seeing when it comes to the SNAP program, are really going to hit kids. And I just cannot say how ridiculous this budget is. Instead of tackling the debt, instead of doing something about that, and by the way, to do that, you would actually take maybe people making over $400,000 a year, and you would say, okay, we're going to make some changes on their taxes. We're going to actually make them pay more. Big corporations, that tax rate went so far down during the last Trump tax cuts. We could bring it up just even a few points, and each point is $150 billion in 10 years. So if they went up to 26% or something like that, that alone combined could give you something like $1 trillion, where you could reduce the deficit, or you could put it into things like housing or childcare. People say that a budget is about your values. Well, this budget values the wealthy at the expense of everyone else. Okay, are there more questions? Any question you want to ask? Okay, let's see. We have another one coming in, and I thought this was an interesting one because we're starting to hear from a lot of the House Republicans that they actually didn't read what they voted on. So the big, beautiful bill, which is actually the big, beautiful betrayal, it turns out they actually didn't know what was in it. So how do I know? Well, Marjorie Taylor Greene, she actually said Full transparency, I did not know about this section, and I would have voted no if I known it was in there. That's on the state AI moratorium. It says you can't do anything more on AI. Representative Mike Flood on the provision limiting the power of the judges to hold people in contempt. He said, of Nebraska, he said, this provision was unknown to me when I voted for the bill. So that was the question we got from Dixie on Facebook. And that was, wait a minute, how when you're dealing with people's health care, 16 million people who are going to lose their health care, millions of people, 4 million people who are going to not be able to access food assistance. How come you're saying you didn't even read the bill and you didn't know? Well, you know what happened at the very end. They're trying to get votes and the president's calling them to support the big, beautiful bill. And so what happens? They end up voting for something they don't even know what's in it. It's absurd at this moment when there have been a lot of lobbying on these AI provisions, and there isn't federal law yet on AI at all to say no state can do one thing. When in fact you have a state like Tennessee with Republicans in charge that actually passed this Elvis bill that says you have control over your own image and your own voice, Nashville, in that state. That's actually something we're trying to do on the federal level, a bipartisan bill that 4 of us are doing, but that hasn't passed yet. So why would you get rid of every state's AI regulation until then? How come some of these Republicans who have been talking about the debt and the deficit and spending and all this, how come they supported something that adds $3 trillion to our nation's debt? Well, now we find out they didn't even read it. Greg on Facebook, what will the tax impacts be if this bill fails and the 2017 tax cuts expire? So the issue here is, and the reason we'd like to get a bipartisan bill passed, is that there were some things in there that you'd want to keep, right? You want to keep some of the tax cuts for, in fact, a lot of them for the people making under $400,000 a year. You want to keep some of the incentives in place that have been around for a while and do something about the R&D tax credit. From my position, I think that's a good thing. There's a number of tax provisions in there that you would want to keep on. But what they're talking about doing, and let's be really clear about this, they're not just keeping those on, they're doing extra things to help the wealthiest, so that the wealthiest are going to get like a $250,000 tax cut. Think about what that would mean for regular people. So that's the problem. You don't want everything to expire, but they're actually taking the worst of it, keeping that in place, the stuff that created this big income inequality. And now, so they're doing that. And now they are also, after creating this big income inequality, they are also saying, okay, we're going to make it even worse. We're going to give incentives for the wealthiest to get even more. And not only that, they're tucking in there some crazy stuff like, oh, judges can't do these national injunctions when something's illegal. Or, oh, we're not going to do any state AI regulation. They're just picking things out that they think would be helpful to them. So that's why this whole thing is such a big, beautiful betrayal. So many people voted for Donald Trump that thought, oh, I'm going to get, I'm worried about inflation, legit concern. And I think he's going to do something about it. Or my rent's too high and I think he's going to do something about housing. Legit thought. But they're doing the opposite. They're actually making the debt worse, which is really bad for you and your kids, because that results in all kinds of problems with the economy. And at the same time, they're not working on the things that matter to you. And that's why this thing is such a betrayal, and why I'm not surprised they're now saying, oh, I actually didn't read it when I voted for it. Well, the Senate now has a chance to correct that. All we need is 4 Republican senators to stand up and say, this is not a big, beautiful bill. We need to make severe changes to it. Anna from Instagram, how long would the Republican budget be in effect if it passed? Well, the last one was like a 10-year, it was a 10-year tax thing, right? Going up, you can see we did those last ones were the 2017 Trump tax bill, in which that's one where the corporate tax rate went so far down and we lost like $1 trillion where we could have been with even a compromise. So that's the kind of numbers that we're dealing with here. It's usually in a 10-year phase. Now they could do whatever they want with it. But the point is that our big concern right now is that we keep getting people, and that means all of you, to post on this, to talk to your friends about it, talk to people who aren't your friends but you think might care about it. If they care about what happens to Medicaid, if they care about what happens when it comes to the economy right now, that so many of the young people that are on this right now are going to inherit, then they've got to do something about it, because we all know what's going on here, right? I said 4 Republicans. That's because if it's just 3 Republicans and it's tied and J.D. Vance can do the president's bidding. So we need 4 Republicans to stand up. We have a number of them already saying that they think that the Medicaid cuts are immoral. Those are their words. And so we know we have a chance of winning this, or at least getting them to make major changes, but we can't do it without all of you. Us just going around and giving floor speeches and talking to an empty room and bugging them about it and calling them, we do all those things. We push them to have to vote on things. We do all kinds of things. But to really win, to win for all of you, you have got to contact them. You've got to contact Republican senators and even Republican House members, because it's eventually going to go back to them. But right now I would focus on Republican senators and tell them what you think about this bill. That's how democracy works. That's your power. And you have more power collectively than we do right now in this room. So we need you, despite this beautiful room and every place we are. If you make your voices heard, and we've seen this happen time and time again. Remember Affordable Care Act when it was going to be repealed, but John McCain went in there and voted no and surprised everyone? That's because people from Arizona had spoken out, and it made a difference. You think about all the progress we've made over the last few years and things that we have gotten done. That's because all of you, because you spoke out. So I'm a big believer in democracy, and it starts right here with all of you on your platforms. So thank you very much. So I've got to go to the floor. I'm actually going to give a speech on the importance of public radio and public TV. Always fun to watch. So I'm going to go do that. And I just did one yesterday about how C-SPAN should be available on all the platforms, like YouTube and like Hulu, so that more and more people and your friends can get engaged. So I'm just into transparency and democracy, because I think that's how America wins. So thanks a lot for having me. And the next senator, I could filibuster, but they're going to be here in a few minutes. So look forward to hearing what they have to say. But I just want to thank you guys. I'm taking my coffee, but under the rules, you can't bring it on the Senate floor. You can just have water or milk. Why don't you guys think about that for a while? See you later.